Welcome back to the Good Dude Good Dad podcast. I'm Jordan, and I'm back here in my original Good Dude Good Dad space. This week we're doing something really cool. We are bringing our friend George back for a 2-part episode where he breaks down his entire life and who he is and where he's come from and where he's at today. George is an incredible human being. His story is crazy. If you didn't know, George has been featured on HGTV. His bar was shown as an example of what to do on Bar Rescue, and he's just an incredible human. He dug deep and went super raw with this episode. So we're so excited to bring you part 1 of 2 of George's story. I think we're going to call it the Trilogy. Enjoy.
Oh, you can't hear the music now.
Even without your headphones, you can hear. Welcome back to the Good Dude Good Dad podcast. I am Jordan. This is our new purple belt.
What's up, purple?
Oh, man. And then we have our honorary guest, Mr. George Bernal.
Wasn't I your first actual guest?
You were, and you're still our highest listened to podcast.
So are you guys giving out? Yeah. Are you giving out like belts?
You got a white belt with 2 stripes.
Sick.
We should get like a UFC belt, like a Good Dude Good Dad belt,
or like a wrestling belt.
That would be pretty sick.
Yeah, just like a big.
I can just give you Jordan's jiu-jitsu belt since he doesn't use it.
That's right. Well, it's got nothing on it, so.
You got a stripe?
I do have one stripe. I think it fell off.
I think you should rip that thing off.
I'm going to. And when I go back, I'm going to take it off.
No, you're not taking it off. You're so dumb. Anyways, we have George back on. Man, if you guys listened to George's episode, we were talking about a lot about hunting, which was dope because George has gotten us into our addicted hunting era, which is weird, dude, because I haven't shot my bow since our last hunt. Not even intentionally, just life and work and
getting purple belts
and focuses elsewhere. But it's always in the back of my truck, ready to go. I just
at least it's in the back of the truck.
It's like ready to go.
Because when we were prepping to go hunting, it was never back there.
I know. I keep it there now, just in hopes that
because they're like, hey, you want to go to the range? Oh, I don't have my bow.
Yeah. Now it's always there, just in hopes of being able to like. Obviously, I know I need to like start putting work back into shooting. It's just like I said, life has.
Well, technically, we're supposed to go in November, but we'll still play that by ear.
Yeah,
we'll see. We got spots to go. I got parents to watch the kids.
Yeah.
I got new arrows, so right when we got back, I got new arrows, and I went that first week, and then I haven't been since. It's not even actually. You're better off because my arrow's not my whole bow's not even in my car. I took it out because the baby.
That's true.
Yeah,
I don't even know if my bow works.
It worked. I mean, you fiddled with it.
That's why I'm waiting. I gotta redo my sight. All that. Anyways, George got us into. He got us into like this new passion that we have of hunting, and we got to talk about it, the experiences we had. We went on another hunting trip again, all together, all 3 of us, and George and I got to. This is the first time I've ever spent that much time with George alone by myself.
Yeah, I don't even think we listened to anything.
No,
the ride back we did.
Yeah, because you're tired from the ride back.
Well, dude, I remember I rolled my ankle.
Yeah, and you're just tired in general. Like after that, that stupid camera shut off again. I don't know what's going on with it.
It's okay.
Sorry, we can't figure out one of our cameras, and this is the second podcast in a row that it's happened. It doesn't make any sense, but yeah, dude, we didn't listen to any music. George had to, or not George. What's the guy's name? Jordan had to meet us there, because they were having their 3rd baby, and he had to take his kids to his parents' house, and so George and I got to talk a lot more just about life and a lot of just like, I feel like we didn't really have a topic. We were just talking.
I feel like the people that come on your podcast, they're usually like come to tell their story, right?
Yeah.
And the first podcast I was on with you, we talked about the hunting trip.
Yeah.
So this podcast, I'm like actually like your other guests, I'm gonna
prepared.
Well, not prepared.
Basically, tell a story.
Or just, I guess I'm going to tell the story about me. Right?
Yeah.
Because before we talked about the story of hunting, and that was an amazing podcast. But But yeah, I guess
Let's be real too. Like
we're gonna be
you're
real.
just gonna keep coming
I'm gonna
back
keep, and
on
I
the
know
show.
this is like a PG podcast.
No, it ain't.
No, it's not.
Okay, well,
You're
it's
good.
gonna get a little rated R
Perfect.
because this is real life, and I'm gonna talk about my real life because a lot of people wonder how I got to where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
And
son.
it's a long story. Oh my gosh. But I'm ready. Why I'm ready too, and why I reached out to you guys saying I wanted to do this is because about a year and a half ago, my life was good, married, kid, been through the ups and downs of life, and something was missing. Like there's something wrong, and I didn't know what it was. Like I just, like my life's good. I have money in the bank. I have great friends. I built this relationship with all these amazing people, but there's just something that was like this burden that was still haunting me, and I didn't know. So I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I reached out to a friend, and I'm like, I need to talk to someone. I need like professional help because I can't figure this out anymore. And in doing that, with my doctor now for almost 2 years, it's really opened up a lot of stuff that I didn't know I was suffering from like traumas and childhood, and it's like we opened Pandora's box, and for the last year and a half I've been going through it and trying to figure it out. And so I reached out to you, well, both of you guys, and said, hey man, like I'm ready to like really tell this story. People know bits and pieces of like where I came, and it's a really interesting story, but they don't know all the dark stuff, and the dark stuff's the real stuff. And listening to your guys' podcasts with all your other guests, it's like they talk real life, and when I talk about I don't talk about the real stuff. I talk about real stuff, but it's all the good stuff. It's not the bad stuff, and the bad stuff is the bad stuff that got me to enjoy the good stuff. So that's what I wanted to share because I'm ready to share it. And there's people out there that need to hear it that I can't talk to and be in front of. And I hope they're able to watch this and listen to this and understand where I'm coming from and why I do the things I do now. So, so growing up, like I grew up here in Santa Ana down the street off Edinger, like we're, I don't know, like a mile away from where I grew up. But I grew up in, I was born in 78, and in the 80s were tough here in Santa Ana. My father was a heroin addict. So I didn't really know him. My mom left. She had my two sisters, and then I was the third child. And my dad did live with us when I was a baby, but all I knew of him was him shooting up in the bathroom, like with me right there, right? Mm. And so my mom said, "You can't be. We can't. This like I got to get my children away from this," and that I'm totally grateful for.
Yeah.
But it also put us in this spot where we're bouncing around from all these random. I've lived in every neighborhood in Santa Ana. I lived on couches. I lived in houses where, this is a very Hispanic culture neighborhood, and I lived in houses that were cousins and relatives, and like 20 people living in one house, right? And my mom would have boyfriends, and I'd be in these houses, and these guys would come home and from work and drink all day. And, my mom had her room with whoever she was with, but then I had to sleep with all these random people I didn't know. And I was like a kid, and I was afraid. Luckily, I had like these two guys that I felt like were my cousins, even though they're just close friends to my mom, her kids, but I kind of grew up with them. And I remember because it was their parents' house, like they got to take the first choice of where they're going to sleep in this big open area, right? And so the one son always had like the pull-out couch. And, I'd sit there and watch these guys get drunk all night, right? And then it's like bedtime. And I remember every night, like he would open his bed, and I would just crawl underneath the pull-out couch just to feel safe, because I didn't know these fucking guys were drunk, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And that was for from when I could remember, that was my life. Like I just always felt like I was trying to survive, you know, and it was so unpredictable. And we did this for a while, and then from there, we a family friend of, I don't even know whose friend it was, offered for us to move into their home, and it was a white family here in Santa Ana too, and you know, they had a room for rent. My mom just had, and the reason was my mom had another child. My father wasn't around. My sisters, because of the chaos that if you want to call it chaos, my grandparents also lived in Santa Ana, and they didn't want my sisters to be around those houses where all these men were.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so they got to stay with my grandparents, but I was a boy, so it's like, nah, dude, you gotta go be with your mom. You know, there's not enough room for you here. We have your sisters, like, you got to be with your mom. And I'm like, okay, if that's the way, whatever, that's what it was. But my mom had a kid, and that's why we were able to go stay at this house. Well, before I went to that house, my mom took me there for them to babysit me. Like, this was before we decided to move in. And so we get there, and mind you, I've kind of suppressed all this, and it's been hiding in my subconscious, and being in therapy, it's all come back out again. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm sharing it, is because I have all these memories that I didn't know that were still there, and they just all came about, and that's what I'm expressing now.
Yeah.
So my mom takes me to this house, and we're walking up the driveway, and the people who live there, they open up their door, and this dog comes running out and just charges me, jumps on me, and bites my arm. Like, literally, and starts hanging onto my arm. And I'm freaking out. You know, I'm probably like 7 years old. And so they come out, get the dog off, and then my mom's like, oh my God, like, I got to take you to the hospital because I got like bite marks. So we go, and they do all the thing. Dude, the next day she takes me back to the same house for them to babysit me. I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is crazy. Like, what are you doing? But that was the only place I could go, you know? Like, there was nowhere else, and these were the people that were willing to help. So that being said, I ended up going back to this house thinking I would be scared. Of course I was frightened. Like, last time I was here, a dog ran at me and bit my arm.
Yeah.
So anyways, we get to this house, and then they end up babysitting for a while, and they had two kids themselves. And then we end up moving there like a couple months later. And they had like a trailer outside, I remember, and they were dude, this house was house of horrors, man. They had like 10 dogs, cats. They were weird. Like, but it was the only place we could go. We're in a room, I swear to you, the size of this studio.
Dang.
And I had like a bunk bed because my sisters would come and stay once in a while. So my mom's like, we'll put a bunk. And then my mom had her bed. And she had the new baby, you know? And so the baby was there, and my mom and me. And, you know, a few months go by, and starting to get to know the family, and they had an older daughter who was, I want to say I was 8 at the time, and I think she was like 13 or 14. And it was so dysfunctional. Like, nobody ran this house. It was just chaos, dude. And I'd come home from my grandparents because I would go there after school, and they lived down the street. You could kind of walk there, and I'd come home, and my mom, like, the dude she had my sister with would come over, and then they would go in that little trailer and do their thing, and I'd be left alone in this room. And I remember the first night, dude, their daughter came in, and she climbed into bed with me and just started doing a bunch of stuff, right? sexual whatever, and I didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I was 8 years old. I'm like, I was frozen. You know, I was freaked out. Like I didn't know, and I had nobody. Like my mom was doing her thing. Like, who am I gonna reach out to? You know. And so this went on all the time. Like my mom would do her thing, and I hear that door creak open, and every night, like when my mother wasn't in there, this person would come in and do all this shit and make me do stuff, and I couldn't share it with anybody. You know, I couldn't share it with my grandparents. I was alone. I was so alone in this place. And you know, when her parents weren't around, like she's like, come in my parents' room, and they had like all this weird, like I said, this is rated R. It's not PG this time, and they just all this like weird sex shit. Like she was just tortured herself, you know. Obviously, I didn't know at the time. Like I was just, for me, I was a kid just trying to survive, dude.
Yeah.
And in this time of being in this house, we were there for probably about 1.5 years, man. This was like in the 80s. And during this time, like my father wasn't around. He would go to jail, and my mom would take me there to visit him, and I would see him there, right?
Yeah.
Or like he'd show up to a donut shop, and for some reason my mom found out he was there, and I'd go see him. Like I would see my dad in spurts of like 5-10 minutes, or like behind a piece of glass in jail, right? And but I never had a father. I had my grandfather, but he like that was partially part of my life. And I had my uncle Russie, who was an amazing artist, and I was drawn to that. I was always drawn to art and music and stuff, and he was also gay, and I grew up with that too. I grew up with that in my family. It was very common in my family, and during the 80s is when the AIDS crisis happened, and unfortunately, my uncle, who was like kind of my hero, and he took care of me. Like he would take me places and just be like a father figure when he could. You know, he also had his own life. He was 28 years old, and during this time where I was in this house, and where all that shit was happening, you know, my uncle got AIDS, and my grandmother took him in, and so she took care of him there. So I would go to this house every day, and I would see him, you know, starting to get sick and starting to lose weight, and this 28-year-old man who was like my hero just fade, just like over months, you know. And I would sit and talk to him and watch him become super weak. Like he went from a 28-year-old to looking like he was 80. I mean, it was just torture, and I would see him suffer, and it lasted probably about 1 year. I would go and see him every day after school. And so I had that burden of me, like seeing that, like just seeing stuff you probably shouldn't see or deal with when you're such a kid. And then I would go and be around all that, and then would be so scared to want to leave to go to where I was going to be. Who knows what was going to happen, because also at that house, like her parents were crazy too. And the dad used to grab pillows and put them over my face and hold it until like I kick and scream, and, you know, and it was like a joke to him. And this was my fucking life. And then being there, I also got bit 2 more times from 2 other different dogs, man. And you know, they're like I always make fun of them. They're like the white family. They play Dungeons and Dragons, and you know, like all that weird shit. Like he always had a Komodo on, like when he was like,
what the heck?
You know, and swords and weird. I'm like, oh, you guys are Cheeto finger people in the basement, right? Is what we call those people now. But yeah, like I would go, and I would never want to leave my grandparents, even though I was there with my uncle, but at least this was my family.
Semblance of normal.
You know, semblance of normal. It's sad seeing my uncle die, and then I would just sit with him and hold his hand, And, you know, I grew up Catholic, and my grandmother would pray with him all the time, and I'd see him pray. But it came to the point where he was just, I'm just, like, he was dying, man. Like, he was just slowly dying. And I would cry. Like, every time I would have to go home to this house of torture. I'm like, I don't want to go. But I never told them. I never told them what was happening, you know. I never shared that. And I recently shared it with my sister about like a couple years ago, because she never knew either. And I just kept it in. I kept everything in, man. And so finally my uncle passed, you know, and he needed to. Like, nobody wanted to see him suffer anymore. And he made a video because he was also molested. He went into a bathroom and somebody molested him too. And when he was younger, he drew pictures of it. My grandmother saved him. And so they wanted to document and him telling his story. So they did. And we have it somewhere because they did on VHS, you know. And so I'm hoping to get that and share that possibly with whoever wants to, because he was an artist, and he did a bunch of murals all over Orange County. And I reached out to a few of the historians to see if they have any pictures, because it'd be cool to do his art. We have a bunch of his art. He did a lot of Native American art, very cool. Kind of like the logo on my company. Is influenced by his style of art. I just kind of took over because nobody's done it, and I started doing, like, took what he did and made it my own, and I'm doing that. But so yeah, I've been trying to do that, and hopefully it comes to fruition and it could happen. But so during that time, like, my uncle just passed. I want to say it was like 80. I remember because he went to the Olympics.
Oh, dang.
And he had the posters and like all, it was like I think in 86, and I think he passed in 89. And so we've been at this house for like a year and a half, and all this, I mean, I was just being tortured, or whatever you want to call it, taken advantage of, and alone, just completely alone in my head, because I wasn't sharing it with anybody. So then my aunt, who I was close to, was my father's sister. She's getting married, so my dad was going to come. Mind you, my uncle just passed away about 6 months prior to this, and then my father is like, mom's like, oh, your dad's coming for the wedding. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'm going to see him. He's not in jail or or like at a donut shop or whatever. And he was a chef. He was living in the Bay Area. I don't know what restaurant he was looking at. This is the 80s, so who knows? But he was a chef. That's how him and my mom met. She was a waitress and he was a chef, and they hooked up and had a bunch of kids, and then he bounced. Besides that, so he was coming to my aunt's wedding, and he came, and he was here for like a week, and I stayed with him every single day. I'm like, Mom, could I just stay with him? He didn't speak a word of English, and I don't speak Spanish, because I grew like, even though I grew up in the neighborhoods and stuff, I never learned. You know, I should have. Growing up in Santa Ana, I just never did. I don't know why, and I just didn't. So it didn't matter. Like, it was my dad. It was like something that was missing from my life, and I'm like, can I just stay with him? And I ended up staying with him at my aunt's house and slept on the floor like all the other places, you know, and hung, like, was with him that whole week. I'm like, dude, this is freaking awesome. I got a dad now, you know. Maybe this person will protect me now from all this shit, and we could get out of this house, and I won't be tortured by this family and this person, and this is going to be great, right? And so the wedding comes Saturday, and you know, we're there and all dressed up, and my dad's in a suit, and I still have the picture of him wearing that suit. And I see him and my mom dancing, and I'm like, oh, fuck, we're going to have a family again. Dude, this is going to be great. Because mind you, we never had a car. We always took the bus everywhere, right? my mom never had a car. That's a whole nother story. We'll get to that. We're just this is before 10 years old, George, right? And I'm like, dude, like in my head, like in my heart and head, I wasn't sharing. This is what I was thinking. I'm like, I'm going to have a family. I'm going to have a family. And my dad, I remember he bought like his kids, like he got us these gold necklaces with the anchor and the cross in it. It's like typical 1980s Mexican necklace from your Hispanic father. It's like, yeah, here you go. Is it real gold? I don't know. I don't care. It's cool. My dad got me something, right? And so the wedding was over and he was leaving and he's like, hey, well, he didn't tell me. He told my mother because I didn't speak Spanish. And I remember during the wedding, he drank beer, obviously. And it's funny, when I did drink, he would open a beer and stick a lime behind the tab and just keep it there. So you'd always get a little taste of lime when you took the sip of beer. And ever since I saw him do that, I'm like, every time I drink a beer like that, I'll always do that. That's off topic though, but he always had cash. So I would go and they had video games at this place. What's crazy is this place where the reception was, I drive past it every day.
No
Every
way.
single day I drive home from work. It's on McFadden and Main Street, kind of there in that area. I drive past it every single day. And they had video games, so he'd give me money and quarter, and I'd play video. Yeah, Dad. Give me like $10. I come back like 5 minutes later. I'm like, Dad, I went to give me money. All right, here, give me money. Mind you, he was getting drunk and all that. Anyways, I saw him and my mom dancing and everything, and I spent that week with him, and then he told my mom, like, hey, look, I want to be with George. I want, at least I thought that's what he said. And I'm going to come back, at least that's what I was told or what I believed, right? Nah, man. He went back a week later, like the woman he was with, we don't know what happened. We don't know if she did something or maybe he was tortured by seeing us or whatever, but like they found him in his garage with needles in his arm and shot up and he died. Like he OD'd or we don't know if somebody killed him. We don't know if his girlfriend got angry that he wanted to come and maybe she did something. We never found out, man. And they didn't want to tell me, and because they saw how happy I was, But it came to the point where it's like, hey, you're that man that you were excited for you to be your father. He's not coming. And so we went up to San Jose, and I remember they had like a funeral, and we went to the house where he died, and I went in the garage where they found him, and I don't know what to think. Like, I'm freaking like 9 years old, man. I just wanted a dad. I just wanted somebody I could look up and call a hero, I think that's why I got so emotional in the last podcast when I heard you and your dad talking. It all just comes back to that, it all comes back to like, fuck, I wish I had something like that. And just like every time something would get close like that, like I had my uncle or I had him, it's just like, nah, fuck you. World's like, you can't have that. It's not in your cards, George. You got to go back to this house and this woman, girl, whatever you want to call in this family, they're going to taunt you some more. And you got to live with that. This is just what the universe decided it wanted for me. So we went back. I remember we went back to that house after we came back from the funeral, and we're still living there. Even though my father wasn't there and he didn't do anything to help my mother, because he paid taxes and because he did what he did, we were able to get Social Security. And because of that, we were able to get our own home and get our own place. And that was beautiful. Like, I had my own room. It was great. I remember it was like, I was going into 5th grade and we ended up moving like near Tustin, and I went, because I bounced from school to school like every year because we were living in different districts, you know? So I never had like a steady elementary school. Every year I would constantly be at a different one. And I never were able to have long-lasting friends everywhere. I think that's why I'm so good with people, is because I constantly had to make friends with people, right?
Yeah.
Like I constantly had to adapt to my surroundings, and even though there's a part of me that is somewhat introverted, where I do like to sit and stand in the corner and watch what's going on. I think for me growing up and having to adapt, like it's easy for me to do that. It's just a part of like survival mechanism, because being a child, that's all I felt. I felt like I've been in survival mode up until, I mean, when I forever. Yeah. I feel that way, you know, because what we got our own place. I had my own room, made friends. My mom was my mom. She did her thing. She loved men. Can't blame her. Like, she didn't do drugs. She didn't drink. She didn't do anything. Like, she just wanted to be loved by someone. And I understand that. And I get that. But also I needed a mother too. And I didn't have that, because all her attention went to these men who came and walked in and out of her life. And we bounced around from apartment to apartment. And then we ended up being near South Coast Plaza. And why I remember that one so much is because this is when I finally made it into junior high, and she finally met a guy who had his own son, and that son came to live with us. And at this time, I was like a latchkey kid, man. Like I in that time, like early 90s, late 80s, like a lot of us were latchkey kids. Single parents, just like, here's your key. This is when you got to play outside, and there's no helicopter parenting. It's like walk home 4 miles from your school. Nobody picks you up, you know? It's just a different life. Like, yeah. Well, I'm like that last generation of where it was like that. I don't know, maybe for you too, Ben, like the last end of it, like you're able to do that, but people don't do that now. And I know when we went hunting, you guys like all conceal carry, right? And everybody, and Mike and everybody I know, they all have guns. And for me, it was like, you know, I said, why don't you have a gun? I'm like, I don't do guns. I'm like, I'm not a gun guy. And the reason I'm not a gun guy is because I remember coming home and my mom taking care of this dude, and I was starving, man. And I came home and I was hungry, and I'm like, hey mom, she's there feeding her boyfriend and the son who's living with us now. And I'm like, mom, I'm starving. Can I eat? She's like, sorry, there's no food for you. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, we didn't make any for you. Figure it out. And I'm like, but why would you make food for them? And not, you weren't here. Like, I'm sorry. I'm like, all right. And that went on, man. Like, that went on for I don't know how long. And, you know, at a young age, I got into a lot of drugs because I had to do something to suppress all this shit, because I couldn't share it with anybody. And I had my friends, and my friends weren't the perfect people, and I got into drugs and all that stuff, and my friends had guns. And I asked to borrow one of those guns from one of my friends, and he's like, why do you want to do it? I'm like, no, I just want to just give me one. And he's like, all right. So he gave me like it's like the 007 gun, PPK or whatever. I don't know. Whatever. And I think it was like 13 or 14, and I was so angry at this kid, that my mom's boyfriend's son. It's like, why does that fucking kid get to eat and I don't, right? And I'm like, I'm going to kill this kid. I didn't know. I was on drugs. I was stupid. And I took this gun, and it was only me and him in the apartment. And he came walking by my room, and I walked out, and I put that gun fucking straight to his forehead. And I'm like, I'm going to kill you. And he just looked at me like he didn't even care, dude. It's like, put me out of my misery. And I realized this guy is just dealing with the same shit I'm dealing with, man. And we just stared at I remember like it was yesterday. We stared. I had that gun at his forehead, and we just stared at each other. And he was taller than me. You know, he's an older kid. Like he was in his probably early 20s. And we were just both looking at each other. And he just, in his eyes, you could just see, he's like, he just looked at me like, I don't care. Do it, you know? And he wasn't saying that, but you could just see in his eyes, he's like, just do it. Like, put me out of my misery. And I didn't. And knock on wood, I didn't, because I wouldn't be here saying with you guys if I did that, dude. And I took that gun. I got a bag, put it in there, and walked all the way to my friend's house that was probably 10 miles away. And I gave it to him, and I'm like, don't ever give me this again, you know? Yeah. And that's the reason why. It's not that I can't control myself. It's just I don't ever want to be in the position where I have to look at somebody like that. Not that I ever will, but it's just I don't ever want that to happen again. I don't want something to be there where that could happen. We're all human. Like, who knows? Maybe something would trigger me and I go back to that thing and all that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this is what I choose to do. I think that's why I bow hunt. Yeah. Is because I rather keep that than a gun or something. And it's not that I don't have self-control. It's just something that's happened in my life that triggers things. And for me, it's just something I don't want. Yeah. You know, and so from there, my drug use got worse, and I was just trying to hide and not deal with the pain. And to the point where I was getting pretty bad into drugs, to where I started doing like heroin secretly. My friends didn't really know. Those cousins that I lived with and I hid under the house, those were my bad cousin friends, and they got into the heavy stuff, you know, and they introduced me to the heavy stuff because they ended up moving where we were. And I got into the heavy stuff and started doing heroin, and nobody knew. I kept it secret, and to the point where I was doing a lot of heroin, doing a lot of acid, doing a lot of bad shit, and I just didn't care. And finally to the point where I did too much and I had like a nervous breakdown. Like I hit, you call it rock bottom or whatever it is. It's just, I had like a panic attack or just a bad trip, bad experience, maybe too much acid, heroin mixed with all the other shit I was doing because I didn't care. I didn't know. And the only place that I ever felt safe was my grandparents' house. And so I had like 5 friends in my room, and we're all smoking weed and doing stuff. And I remember I had this panic attack or whatever you want to call it, just a bad trip, and I left. I just left them there. Mind you, my mom was still with that dude, that with the son. The son wasn't living with us anymore, obviously. I think after the gun situation, he's like, I can't be here because I don't trust this fucking crazy kid. But I walked to my grandparents' house, which is like another 7 miles, dude. And I'm like, what am I doing? But it was the only place I felt safe, man. It was the only place that was somewhat had stability in my life. Even though I saw my uncle die, it was just safe haven, right? And so I walked there, and I jumped in the shower trying to just like make the whole panic thing stop or bad trip or whatever. And I was in the shower for hours, and my grandma's like, what are you doing? You know, like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I'm losing it, you know? And so I finally told her, I'm like, I can't go back to that house, and I'm sick. I don't know what's the matter with me. I've been doing all these drugs secretly behind, you guys never knew, like all this, and I need help. She's like, all right. I'm like, she took care of my uncle. I'm like, I'm sure she could take care of me. And this was when O.J. Simpson trial was going on. I remember it clearly because I pretty much watched the whole thing like in a bed for 2 months. It was whatever. So I'm like, grandma, like, I need help. Like, I don't want to go back to this life anymore. And she's like, all right, let's do it. Dude, she locked me in her back room and detox. No methadone, no like drugs to help, like nothing, just straight prayer, holy water, and deal with it, right? Dude, it was probably the worst 2 weeks of my, I've been through some crazy shit. Let's just say being sick.
Yeah.
Right. And I got through it, man. But the thing is, I got through the drug detox, but I still had all that pain and torture and torment and everything that I was using that to suppress, right? Yeah. And all that shit just came up like a freaking submarine bursting out of the fucking water, ready to just cause hell. And so all those feelings and deep emotions that I just put aside for so long just all came to the surface, dude. And it was torture, man. It was like the nightmares, the devil, like struggling with just my faith and all that, because my grandmother being such a cat, like this Catholic who prayed for me when I was going through all. I mean, I used to draw and do art and everything, and I would draw like weird shit, and I couldn't even do that. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything that wasn't holy, right? Because I was just so tortured by whatever. So I just wanted a safe place. I remember I got my first car at the time. It was a 61 Ford Falcon. The people I bought it from were like my friend's cool dad, and he painted a skull and crossbones on the hood. It was rad, you know? And I remember I got that car, and the first thing I did was I got to scratch that off because that's bad. That's evil. That's like my tormented soul, because that's what I was going through, man. Like I was just going through all this pain and hurt and everything that was, I thought that was bad. I couldn't do it. Like just the smell of like weed was just like, oh, that's so evil. Like, oh, it's gross. I remember all my pictures that I drew, and I would go and burn it all and like do all these things thinking like it's going to help me. No, that wasn't even it. I was just so chemically imbalanced. I was so tortured in my soul. I was tormented by all the shit that happened to me as a child, where you're supposed to feel safe and loved by people. It was just like, and I never was. I was just always just like, sorry, man, this is the universe you're gonna live in, man. You're gonna deal with it. You're gonna fucking, we're gonna take everything that you thought was precious to you, and we're gonna fucking take it away, and you can't have it anymore. We're gonna take your father. We're gonna take your uncle. You're gonna take my grandfather. Like, just everything, you know, everything. We're gonna take your mom. We're gonna make her love somebody more than she loves you. Did she? I don't know. Maybe for her at the time, she just needed that to feel something, love. And I wasn't enough for her. Like the love of a child wasn't enough for her, you know? Yeah. So that tortured me. Like all of it tortured me, man. And I couldn't be in this place anymore, because everywhere I went, every single crevice of Santa Ana and Orange County, like I went to, that it was just bad memories of fucking that house where this shit happened, or that corner where I got drugs and then this happened, or here where I got the shit kicked out of me by like people on PCP, or I got in a fight here or a fight there, or I got jumped there. It's like everywhere I was just constantly just fucking, there's nothing good in my life staying here. Opportunity come up, met some girl, said, hey, you want to come with me to New York and run away with a circus? Yes, let's do it. And I'm like, my life changed, man. I met somebody. I befriended this guy in high school, and his family were circus family. And I met his cousin over the summer, and we hit it off, and we fell out of touch. We fell back in touch, and it was like timing was everything, right? It was, she reached out. I was probably at the lowest point in my life, meaning being tortured by my past. Even though I wasn't dealing with the past anymore, it was just the memories of the past. And she's like, hey, I'm coming for the summer. And we spent the whole summer together. You know, I was 18 and sober, and she's like, hey, I'm going back. And I'm like, cool, do you want to go with me? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, I got to go back and got to go be in the show. And because she was a performer, she was a circus performer. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to go with you. I'm like, I don't want to fucking stay here. This place kills me everywhere I go, you know? She's like, all right, well, come. I'm like, really? She's like, well, yeah, at least come and we'll go to New York and see my sister and you could see if you want to do this. And I'm like, all right. So I went for like a month and decided like, I'm going to go and run away with the circus and start this whole new life, man. And it was the first time in my life where I had these random people that they just knew of me. They didn't know what I've been through. They don't know who I was. They're just like, this kid just, our daughter loves him and we're going to love him too. And it was the first time in my life I felt love from somebody that wasn't even my family. Like, mind you, I felt it from my aunts and my grandparents, but it was part-time, you know, it was when they were there. It wasn't like this full-time, like a parent love, you know, like that unconditional, like, regardless of what you do, regardless of who you are, I'm going to love you till the ends of the world, right? And it was the first time these people just came into my life that showed me that, and it changed my whole perspective. I'm like, oh my God, this is what that's supposed to feel like.
To be continued.